And welcome back to Rage Gaming and more Path of Exile 2. I think more and more people are now at the point where they're trying something new, maybe a different class or build entirely. And I did that not too long ago with this new ranger. Since, you know, the lightning deadeye setup looked very fun and is very strong, and within about 4 days of making the character, I had something really strong to challenge the endgame with. And you can do it relatively cheap too. And if you're thinking about trying it yourself, hopefully you'll have some resources to draw on already. Even if that's only, say, 1 divine or maybe roughly that amount in exalts. Especially if you've got anything left over for upgrading, like gem cutters or artificer orbs and so on. But even if you are tight on currency and resources, but you do have anything to work with, it really can go far. So the point of this video is just to cover the main methods of gearing up, but the point is to get yourself strong enough to tackle basic tier 15 waystones, and that'll be the starting point to start scaling your currency drops, improving your gear, taking on the pinnacles, and so on. The basis of a lot of it is going to be direct trading to get items you want, so knowing what to do to maximize your results, to minimize the costs. It's not that complicated, but it is important. The number one rule to start with, if you have limited funds, is to avoid spending in divines. And the way to do that is very simple. Just filter by trade filters, and then come to relative and change that to exalted orbs only. And then you will only be shown the things that actually sell for exalted orbs. Now, a cool trick you can do when you're actually filtering by items is click on something. So let's say in this case, I want to see belts that have armor on it, but the highest armor number first, please. Just click on it and it will reorganize it to show the belts that have armor on it and the highest currently available roll under the filters I currently have. Another little trick you can do for filtering is instead of doing it this way, just doing stat filters and then doing the resistances like that, you can just weigh them instead. So by clicking on stat group, you get a whole different option, which is pretty neat because, for example, if you don't want to see anything with thorns, you could just go to not and filter any of the types that provide thorns, and now that will not be shown to you in these listings. But instead we can go to, say, count, and then we'll get those resistances in there, so all the 3 types we're going to look for. We'll do a really small minimum on all of them, and let's say I only need 2 of these. And now it will show me things that have a minimum of 15 resistance. It doesn't have to show me all 3. Whereas if I put in count of 3, it has to show me all 3 of those with those minimums. So let's say you're starting with building resistances. You want 75% resistance in everything. So instead of using count, we can do a different thing. We can do weighted sum. Again, let's put all 3 resistances that we're looking at there. And then we put the minimum sum to something like 60. So what's going to happen here is it's going to find anything that has a combined sum of 60% resistance, whether that's lightning and cold, or just fire and lightning, or all 3 combined. And so this is a great starting point for building up a set, because you'll just get good numbers for cheap, and then you could use runes at the end to fix your resistances on what you're missing, or maybe a targeted item at the end that has a lot of lightning resistance because you're lacking on that, or whatever. But you can see the total sum listed here, 72. If I click that, it's going to do the same thing. It's going to only show me stuff with the maximum or highest total sum of these things, which is 123 on one item for 25 exalted orbs. So yeah, some pretty cool filtering tips there to consider. On the topic of purchasing cheap and effective items, such as this one that technically has energy shield and max increased energy shield, it's got max life, intel, this is not terrible. It's just some of the rolls are particularly low. It's listed 20 days ago for 1 exalt. This dude is not selling this item. And if we scroll down, you're going to see a lot of 1 exalted orbs listed. Be aware that the people listing items at 1 exalt, especially the ones that look particularly good, these people are not going to respond or react initially, or maybe ever. It is actually quite common for people to just fire and forget. Maybe they have a dump tab or they're just selling a load of stuff for 1 exalt. They don't know how much it really is worth. So they put it up, see what response they get. They don't really care even if they get a response because it's only 1 exalt. So there's 2 tips you could consider for this. Taking your time and finding someone that listed something recently, not like 20 days ago, but within the hour would be ideal. They're more likely to actually respond to you. Or you could actually go to the filter of exalted orbs and go minimum 2. But you know, as you crawl up between 2 and 5, you get people that are going to be a lot more responsive. When you're buying things for 1 or even 2 exalts, you should expect it to take time before someone actually responds to you. But if you're trying to get a real bargain and you're patient, you absolutely can. Another thing to consider if you're trying to get things for cheaper and be efficient and get going as soon as possible is actually the type of item you're talking about. If I type in a specific kind of armor, you can see it immediately. There's rogue armor, then you've got advanced rogue armor, then you've got expert rogue armor. So if we search by the expert version, you can see that the required level on this is 65. But if we drop down to advanced, the required level on that is much lower, 48. Basically, Enemies that are that level or higher have the chance to drop these. And so a lot more people are going to be finding the advanced versions of items than they are the expert. Experts are, potentially better, but not always guaranteed. It's just a better starting base. So you could get items that are in the advanced category rather than the expert version that have still rolled really well for a lot cheaper as another option. But where should you begin when you start buying items? I would always start with the thing that's going to be the most difficult or hardest thing to attain. Something that's going to really impact the build if you don't have it. So, I don't know, a good example of this was actually a cheap item. This is a unique helm that greatly improves your energy shield. I'm standing here with 1600, I take this off, I'm down to 600. I'm gaining over 1000 shield from one item. And we're talking about a unique that's 1 exalt, or maybe a couple more than that if you don't want to wait for no one to reply to you. But it is an important item for me in this scenario. But obviously, the basis of your class are going to be the starting point for most, such as with a bow user, deadeye in this case, I'd want my bow and I'd want my quiver. More universally, I think one of the best items to begin with is actually your amulet, because this affects a lot of things. It can have some really important stats on it, like big resistance, sure, but also spirit in this case, rarity of item. But it's where you get your allocated skill. People will be selling these with skills already allocated onto them, which could save you a lot of cost, because actually buying the distilled emotions can be really expensive, especially for the more expensive allocations. So start with the stuff that's generally harder and more expensive, and while you're looking for that, you can get things that are easier, such as a belt that's just going to be a nice stat stick or something. If you have your resistances nicely stacked up, that leaves you with more room on things like your rings to worry less about resistances and more about things that are going to enhance the build. Now, as I said, you need to reach 75% resistance for the cap of all 4. Using the weighted sum stat group can be really helpful, but don't forget whatever you end up with, whether you're considering what to rune in to solve your resistances or not. The all-important and incredibly cheap catalysts do exist, and this can be a great way to add quality to your jewelry to help you with those resistances. For example, on this ring we have 19% increased quality on our ring, greatly increasing the lightning resistance that this provides me. 44%. That ring alone is having a huge impact on my lightning resistance standing here in this moment. And a big part of that was an incredibly cheap modifier. To get those, just go to the currency exchange, instead say that you've got exalted orbs. There's a tab for it under breach, and find what you need. In my case, that was lightning. So for 1 exalted orb, I can get between 3 and 4 of these, but it does greatly vary based on the type of catalyst we're talking about. For example, for cold modifiers, you can get 5 in 1 at this exact moment. But it really helps top you off on your resistances. Don't forget about them. The next really cheap way to get power that I want to reference is your boots. Check this out. 15% increased movement speed. Miserable, right? For most classes, probably so. A lot less so for Deadeye because I have stacking Tailwind, which gives me movement speed anyway. But obviously, I'd rather have 35% movement speed boots. I actually do have much better boots than this for movement speed and good stats too. But I really wanted to stack some resistances and get dexterity. And so that's what I did with these boots. I found this incredibly cheap pair because it was only 15% movement speed. You don't want to do this ideally for map clear times, but it is a great way to get started. And if you're building a build up to take tier 15s on initially, it's not about efficiency, it's about being able to do it and then fixing stuff later. Now you've got income streaming in. So I would say filter by movement speed by 25% movement or lower, and you will find some incredible deals. One thing I would recommend to you as well is consider breach rings in particular. They're a unique ring type that can have maximum quality 50% instead of 20% with a normal ring. So if you find them on the trading website with some seriously good affixes relevant to your build, this is apparently a fire ring, I could put fire quality on this to greatly increase that percent increased fire and help the flat fire as well. Maybe even if I got fire resistance on this, that'd be quite the funny, serious combo to massively improve the quality of this ring. But yeah, breach rings are really high in potential for that reason, so definitely consider them. See what you can get. You might be able to get something for relatively cheap, improve it, and then add a load of quality to it. Another way to greatly reduce the cost of items initially is a tough one. It's rarity, of course, increased rarity of items found. This means as you're doing stuff and something drops, it might increase that rarity, taking a drop that would have been something else into an exalted orb drop or even higher. It does have a big impact, but that impact falls off at about 100%. If you can, you want to get towards 100%, but that, I want to stress, is a luxury. If you are not yet clearing tier 15 waystones, percent rarity of items doesn't matter to you. You need to sort your resistances. You need to get a functional build. You need power. You clearly don't have enough if tier 15 is still an issue. So completely ignore rarity of items found until you're functional in the endgame at tier 15 waystones, where you get to get good drops, sell them, and then you can upgrade into items that have rarity on them. You will find that percent increased rarity of items found on gear greatly increases the price of them. But obviously, we all want 100% or higher if we can get it. But like I said, it's a luxury. If you're unsure what you're standing at, by the way, you can check the skill page, go to any relevant attack skill, and at the bottom you've got on-kill effects. Tells you the rarity drop modifier. I'm standing here with 50%, but of course that doesn't track my charm, which is going to add another 20% in this case. As you can see, you can get some particularly potent rarity of items found percent on rings, so that's a great place to stack it up in one item. Something you can follow as well, which is pretty cool, if you take a look at physical or martial weapons, when you're scrolling you can see these numbers, DPS or physical DPS. It'll also tell you the element DPS. It basically combines the two, puts them over here. That gives you an idea, at least some kind of gauge on how strong the item is, but it doesn't fully show it. For example, these levels to all projectile skills, incredibly potent. It's not really going to be reflected in the DPS. But if we click that DPS and go top down, you can see for some, pretty reasonable prices, some insane DPS numbers here. So let's filter by exalted instead to see those. Go from the top down to see what the highest DPS is. 300 for 80 exalts. It's got the levels to projectile skills. It's got the physical damage on it that I was looking for. This is not a bad bow. For 80 exalts, you could easily be selling this for a divine. So it does give you at least an indicator to understand the value or power of a weapon. But like I said, it is not a fair representation or completely accurate. Just something to look at and consider. But with the affixes that we actually care about, if we scroll down from the ridiculous, say 300 listed DPS and go down somewhere lower, here's one that has the projectile levels and the physical damage somewhat, 260 listed DPS. For 15 exalted orbs. You're definitely going to get less DPS out of this than say a higher or other ones we're looking at, but it's significantly cheaper. Usable for a while and then swap from, no problem initially. However, as another tip, you could always consider weapons that don't have that really important or rare or expensive modifier to really bring down the price. Obviously, if it's key to your build, it's going to be a DPS loss, but as a starting point for significantly cheaper than otherwise, it is something you can consider. Whether that's less levels of the thing, for me that would be projectile skill levels, maybe for a sorceress it'd be like plus levels to lightning skills. Instead of looking for +5, you go down to +4 or 3 or something, and you find something much cheaper. Or you go for something with really good stats that you really need, that it's just missing that ideal affix, or maybe a different one that's really nice, like attack speed in my case, and getting something strong, not optimal, but a great starting point. That brings me to the RNG nature of finding items like this and seeing if you can make it yourself. Obviously, right now I have a bow that doesn't have projectile levels on it, and I absolutely want that. So what I could do while I'm playing is look for bows of that nature. We have the dual spring bow right now. Whenever it drops with a good base, this is an expert one, we can always just alch it, roll the dice, see what we get. Here we've got something nice in terms of the physical damage it has. The element damage could be useful, but no projectile levels. Interestingly, what we have is a prefix, and a prefix. So this has one suffix on it right now. This website is PoE2DB or PoE2 database. Under that, we can go to items and have a look at specific stuff, like for example, bows. This shows me all the possible prefixes and suffixes that can roll. As we just saw, that bow already has all of its prefixes, so I can't roll more on that with exalts, but I have a chance to get 2 more different suffixes. The suffix on it right now is the critical damage bonus. Instead, I could get any of these, such as the one we want. Increased level to all projectile skills. The sad reality though is it's easier to roll physical damage on a bow that's a prefix because look, there's increased physical damage, flat physical. Of the 8 possible prefix rolls, 3 of them are related to the physical. Meanwhile, we have a 1 in 12 chance to hit the all level to projectile skills that we're looking for. Therefore, my advice if you're doing something like this is being aware how unlikely it is to get the thing you're after. For me, it's unlikely to roll with an exalt those extra projectile levels. But for the sake of the video, I'll just do it to show you. So we got attack speed, which is not bad, and then we got critical hit chance. But it doesn't have enough physical damage to get away with it. There's no flat damage here. And there's no projectile level, so I doubt I'm going to sell this for really anything. My general technique then is to not waste exalts doing what I just showed you. I'll alch it and then see if it rolls the projectile levels, the rarer, impactful thing, and then craft on it if it gets it. Fortunately for the ever popular sorceresses, you're one of the most popular builds in the game, and you have essence crafting for your thing. So let's take a wand. So we got attuned wands here, and we got siphoning wands. These are the two wands that they're interested in. Instead of RNGing and hoping the alch roll hits what we want, you can instead use essence, like say, essence of electricity. So by using this, we're going to guarantee we're upgrading it with a lightning modifier. It might hit lightning skill levels on this roll. Instead, in this case, it hit lightning damage. But you know, I'm not a sorceress. I just do this for selling purposes. Josh is playing a sorceress with that build, and so does this quite commonly, crafting a good wand for himself and even making them occasionally to sell for good exalts or even multiple divines. +5 of lightning skills is an incredible thing. And you can guarantee that you're going to have a high chance to roll plus lightning skills on a wand using essences in the way that I just showed you. If you roll a +4 or even a +5, that's an incredibly valuable item. But if you're just starting out, you could easily use an essence of lightning to get +3 or something and give yourself a nice starting point. The next source of power that I got a reference that's pretty cheap and effective to go with is of course your jewels. They can have up to 4 modifiers on them, unless you corrupt them to give them an extra modifier or inherent if it rolls your way. Wouldn't recommend this in this scenario. But yeah, you just look for cheap jewels that are going to be effective. What that really means is 3 affixes or more that are relevant to your build. With that, you can easily buy these for 1 or 2 exalts, no problem. In this case, I get benefits from attack speed, lightning damage, element damage, and the crossbow reload speed is irrelevant. So for this, I paid 1 exalt. They can also be crafted when you do find them, so don't forget that. Here's one, Emerald of Thirsting. Mana Leech is not a bad thing at all. Let's just give it a second modifier. Element damage, that's 2 out of 3 we've got there. Attack speed, that's 3 out of 3. I might as well exalt it to 4 out of 4 to see. We got projectile damage. That's a 4 out of 4 jewel relevant to my build right now. If we pull up the skill page to show you this, I'm going to take off this jewel that's not really relevant to my build anymore. I've got the caps that I need. You can see that my damage is going to drop slightly by about 300 there, and it's going to go back up to over 1,000 more. By taking that off, we have just gained a full 1,000 DPS standing here on the stat sheet. That's how impactful jewels are, and that's how quick and easy it can be to graft one if you're lucky. So real quick to have a look at that, I've gone to the website and got any jewel, then I've put in the exact things that I just rolled that are relevant to my build. As you can see, we're finding those 3 for 1 exalt, 4, 5. So what I've just generated is probably worth around 5 exalts at least. Not bad. But I could get that specific thing I just RNG rolled with no RNG for just a couple exalts really. On that note, I do want to make you aware of specific build unlocking or functional type of things, such as freeze buildup, increased freeze buildup. With this build, I get a lot of benefits by freezing enemies because they shatter and explode in AoE. If I don't have enough cold and freeze buildup through my setup, using jewels to give myself just straight up another 20% is incredibly helpful and not expensive to do either. So while there are the best affixes you can get, there are also affix types that are going to help a build begin to function. That later, you know, like I just did, can be kind of whittled away from the build or out of the build, now that I have more flat damage, more cold in general, more reliable freeze. Just something to consider when you're generating your jewels. Alright, let's now talk about progressing your power. There are various sources of cheap power that top you off, that can be impactful, very much so, or just slightly, but things you want to be doing to gain greater output and also survivability. Much like what we talked about with adding quality to your jewelry to increase your resistances, the same thing for adding quality to your armor to give myself more evasion and energy shield. It feels obvious to say this, but don't forget, it's not expensive to do, and it really does add a lot to your resistances, a lot to your, evasion, energy shield, or whatever. Even if you plan to get rid of the item you bought for very cheap, it's still very impactful. But the number one thing you should be doing to increase your power kind of immediately is adding quality to your skills. Because my lightning arrow has the 20% quality, it's firing an extra beam to one additional enemy, allowing the AoE to be more potent. Having more quality on your most important skills could make a huge difference. Take Wind Dancer here, which is an aura. This provides me extra evasion rating per stage, and adding quality to it gave it an extra stage. So instead of having 3 stages of 19% evasion per stage, I have 4. That's an extra 19% evasion rating just added to my evasion rating. It's a massive amount. So adding quality to your gems can indeed improve your survivability as well as your output by a lot. And of course, all you need for that is gem cutter prisms, which are not expensive, and if it's going to increase your DPS, you should be spending that. Right now, the value of these is absolutely insanely low. Literally, barely 1 orb for 1 prism. So basically 4 orbs for 4 prisms. That gets you to the max 20% for the value of adding quality to something. That's a super cheap way to straight up improve your power. You want to check what the quality provides you and then just start getting everything with it that's going to be relevant for that. Lightning bolts strike the targets of your next 2 attack hits compared to 0 added. That's really impactful. Knowing the priority of what to get quality on is important, but it's more than likely the main DPS abilities you're spamming the most could benefit from quality. The other thing to consider is, say, 5 versus 6 links. 6 links is obviously awesome because you can fit more in there, but maybe it's better for you to have many multiples of 5 links instead of 1 6 link. Getting a 5 link is significantly cheaper and easier than it is to get a 6 link. Whether you're using, say, the greater jeweler orbs to do that, or the RNG, of course, of Val orbing. Very simply, you take a Val orb and you apply it to a skill gem, and that might add a support skill slot. So you set up one with 3 slots in it already, and then you Val orb it, and it might give it 4 slots. Alternatively, it could add or remove a level of the skill, add or remove quality. So you want to do this with a low level skill gem you don't care about. Then when it actually rolls that extra slot that you wanted, you start to invest in it. Be aware you can still level this skill up, but you can't add quality to it anymore. So it's a kind of nice temporary source of power getting you those slots without spending greater jeweler orbs. But since you're going to want quality on your most important skills, this is a temporary thing. But yeah, from there, it's really just play the game, level up, get more skill points, slightly improve your gear, get those affixes that you really want, get some rarity in your gear, function in the end game, get a load of currency, use that currency to get the improvements. You could be cleaning up your jewels to get them 4 out of 4 perfect rather than 3 out of 4, or getting the really expensive affixes that matter, getting your 6th link, doing regular crafting and maybe making something amazing you actually use or sell, and just generating currency to get what you want and need. So on and so on, that's the process. But getting started at 15 tier waystones is not too difficult and very doable for very cheap. But yeah, that'll cover it for today. That's what I did to effectively gain power on a new character, starting with a new build. Tier 15 mapping was extremely effective straight away, and scaling beyond that into higher difficulty level content has not been that hard. I hope this was a useful talk and video though, but if you guys have any extra tips, let us know in the comments. For now, I've been Hollow, you've been you. Thanks for watching.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.